So you wanted a QBitManage video. Where's that QBitManage video, Tech Tales? Where is it? My gosh. Okay. You know what? In fairness, I did say a very long time ago that the next video I would do would be about QBitManage, and that was far from the truth. But this is it. If you were waiting, like this one commenter, for my QBitManage video, then here it is. Now let's get started. What is QBitManage? First of all, if your torrent client is Deluge or RTorrent, move on. This video isn't for you. Really, QBitManage, as the name implies, is for QBitTorrent. It's an application for that. So if your torrent client is not QBitTorrent, this video is not for you. Just move on. Now, for those of us that do have QBitTorrent as their client, welcome. Welcome, my friends, one and all, to this fantastical video for QBitManage. So in this video, we're going to cover certain things together. Now, let's go ahead and head over here. Let's go to apps. Let's do a quick install of QBitManage, QBit_manage by Bobacan. This is the official repo, not the, no offense to, what was the other repo? Let's see. The other repo is Hot.io. No offense to Hot.io. You can use that too. Really good repo there. But I like to stick to the original repos for things. So here's QBitManage, and we're just going to hit edit. Pretend I hit install on your end. And this is kind of what we get, this sort of page. Now, usually the repo in the beginning just kind of says this. It would be best just to add the .latest. I don't think you have to. If you're installing it first, it will ask you, it'll bring up a window saying, do you want the latest, the develop, etc., like most of those installs. But if it's not there, just make sure that's there. I was set on develop. Next thing you're going to want to do is obviously set it up for your custom network. Remember, Docker, we try to create a custom network so that all the containers can see each other. It's like they're on the same router. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, go see the Docker video that I made. I've referenced it in the server to Sonar to Radar guide. I don't even know how you got this far without watching that video. It's embarrassing. Okay. Now, next up, we see something here called root dir. This is really crucial that we define for this container the host path and the proper container path. The container path can be pretty much whatever you want, but we're just going to stick with the default, which is /data/torrents. And remember, we want persistent path, so mount user data torrents. Well, wherever your QBitTorrent save directory is, that's what this needs to be. So what does that mean? Under downloads here, where you see default save path for QBitTorrent, you see how you have this path that says, in my case, it's /data/torrents. Same thing here is what you're going to want to do is /data/torrents. So depending on kind of what you chose in terms of your QBitTorrent, how you did it, these container paths need to be very much the same, if you will. So QBitManage needs to see this root dir as the same container path as the one on QBitTorrent's client container path. So they need to essentially look like the same exact folder. And ideally they must point to the same exact folder on your server or your host path, right? So if, for example, if we were to change this to something else that didn't match QBitTorrent, it's going to be kind of bad because it's going to be trying to, QBitTorrent's going to tell it this is where files are, and then QBitManage won't be able to really see those files, etc. So we really want to keep things persistent across the two things. So if we take a look, we're going to start here in terms of the config setup. Now, first thing you're going to want to do though is once you've kind of set this up, qbt config, you can just call it config.yml. You can set a schedule. In my case, I set 1440 minutes, which is every 24 hours. And there's all these other categories here that you see on the left. Okay. And you see all these things on the left here. And this is more similar to kind of if you go to the config setup, which is probably in the description below, you can see that it's essentially covering these environment variables right here, QBT cross seed. So for those of you who don't know, is these on the left are like, this is essentially trying to fill in for certain things that's already going to be in the config file here. So if you take a look, recheck is already on there, cat update's already on there. There's just no QBT cat update. So this is kind of an environment variable for this container where you can just kind of set these here if you would like, but I just set it all to false and I changed it in the config file. That's kind of how I did it. Remember, at the end of the day, the configuration file will win out, just like any environment file will usually win out, right? In terms of if you put certain options in, let's say, Docker Compose for a container, well, the environment file will always override whatever those initial options are under Docker Compose, if we remember that lesson. So similarly speaking, here we just put false on everything. Now, one other thing at the bottom here you're probably going to want to add is a torrent dir. This should point to wherever the QBitTorrent torrents are, which is usually located here under BT backup. And then we want to put a container path of /torrent dir. Now, torrents dir is the actual directory attribute in terms of the config file that utilizes that container path. So path of your QBitTorrents directory, and it's required for save torrents attribute in the recycling bin. So again, if we take a look here, there should be one more. So under the recycling bin attribute, it's again, recycle bin, the method of deletion will move files into the recycle bin located in root_dir.recycle bin instead of directly deleting them in Qubit. This is very useful if you're hesitant about using the script to delete information off your system without first checking it. And so, plus with the ability of the script to remove trumped and unregistered torrents, there is a very small chance that something may happen to cause the script to go to town in your library. With the recycling bin in place, your data is secure. So that's why this will save a copy of your .torrent and .fastResume file in the recycling bin before deleting it from QBitTorrent. This requires the torrents dir to be defined. So that's kind of what we're setting it up for here. By default, I'm not sure if that's there. It probably is or isn't, but just make sure that you have it. It's best to have it than not have it. And once you have your root directory, you're going to want to hit apply, and then you're going to want to run it. So in my case, I already have the config file. Okay, so if you don't have the config file, what happens is then QBitManage will attempt to utilize all these environment variables from the container. And because they're all set to false, it won't do anything. Let's talk about the config file. You get the config file from the description, but really it's from here. It's the QBitManage GitHub, and I'll include the link below. But of course, it's all right here. And you want to basically copy and paste this into essentially your own config file. Okay, so this is my config file. And we're going to take a quick look at this config file here. And we're just going to cover all these options one by one. And I trust that you guys can read the wiki for a lot of this. I'm not going to cover every single QBitManage option, but we're going to cover just what I think is the inner workings of QBitManage. So the first things first is we're going to go ahead and cover the option of dry run. So dry run is something you're probably going to want to set to true. And what it basically does is it creates a simulation of sorts of what QBitManage is going to do. So I remember the first thing when I was looking at QBitManage and all its options, I was like, wow, there's a shitload of options here. So the one thing you want to do before you start messing with all your torrents from your important torrent sizes, you want to set dry run to true. Always set dry run to true when you're first starting out. Next, cross seed. If you haven't already, check out the cross seed video. This function is pretty much defunct. There was a point where cross seed did not support torrent injection into QBitTorrent in terms of cross seeds. So QBitManage functioned to inject the matches that cross seed found. It was just glorified. It was finding matches for, it was finding candidates for searches, but it wasn't injecting them. This option is pretty useless if you are going to be using cross seed. If you're not going to be using cross seed, then this option is also equally pointless. Again, this whole thing is it doesn't really even really make sense. So recheck is, and again, remember these are commands. So if we go up, commands. So it's this section of the wiki. So this section will ignore any commands that are defined via environment variable or command line and use the ones defined in this YAML file instead. So again, any commands. Now, if we look at the commands, then this is a separate area right here. So here's the various commands that we were seeing in the container, right? All the commands that are pretty much here show up in the container. But again, a lot of these can be injected into the command section of the config file. So again, this section will ignore any commands that are defined via environment variable or command line and use the ones defined in this YAML file instead. So similar to like Docker Compose and environment variable files, this is kind of overriding all that. So category update. What is category update? Let's take a look. Use this if you would like to update your categories or move from one category to another. Tag update, same thing. Update the tags. These are essentially the commands we want QBitManage to run. So I put false on both because I don't really care for that yet. Remove unregistered means any torrent that doesn't have an active tracker on it. I do want this QBitManage to automatically remove that torrent that's unregistered, so I set that to true. Tag any tracker with an error. This is also set to true. Remove orphan files, true. Tag no hard links, true. Share limits, false. Skip QB version check, true. I put that to true. Sometimes what happens is QBitTorrent updates, then QBitManage will be like, oh, we don't know that update. We can't run for it. So you want to have this to true. And next, cleanup. Skip cleanup, false. We don't want it to skip cleanup, because if we set that to true, it will skip emptying the recycling bin folder and the orphan data directory. So we don't want that. We want it to clean those directories up when it can. So these are the commands that we want QBitManage to manage or run. Then each of these commands has sections underneath that are relevant, and it also has other things that are required in terms of the directory section. So remote dir, root dir is required for a lot of them. In fact, it's essential because otherwise it doesn't really know what's going on. Remember, again, root directory is the same directory where all your torrents are, right? That QBitTorrent is saving into. So let's take a look at here. Settings. These I just left as my default settings. Nothing too crazy here. Directory, again, these we covered. Root directory is going to be the same as the QBitTorrent one. Remote directory, it's irrelevant for QBitManage if it's in a Docker. Recycling bin, this again, wherever you want to put it, you can put it there. So data, I just put it right in data torrents. Torrents dir, /torrent dir, this is defined in the container, in the actual container template. And so finally, orphan directory data / torrent / orphan data. Remember, all of these will get created by the script, so you don't have to like create .recycling bin or orphan data or anything like that. Next up is category and path parameters. So again, this is essentially the name of the category and then the path that each category has. So this section is really important because all categories must be defined. It must be defined, or the script will just crap out errors. So the key is going to be the category name, and the value will be the path or the safe path of every category. These must match exactly. So again, let's take a look. Category, path to category, very straightforward. So all your QBitTorrent categories, in my case, I did TV, right? Even the 4K ones just go right into the TV. I don't really care about separating out 4K TV from HD TV. Again, for torrents, you don't have to separate them too much. I just only maybe TV shows here and movies here. So I just put those all into one folder, data / movies, data / torrent / movies, very straightforward. So again, tracker, this is again setting tags for certain trackers with the names. The most important thing that they changed with 4.1.3 as of making this video is the no hard link section, which tags movies and TV shows not hard link outside the root directory. So outside where the torrents are saved. If there's no hard linked file somewhere else outside of that, if that makes sense in terms of, remember, Sonar, Radar, they create hard links of things in your download directory into your media library directory, right? Because remember, you're not pointing Plex or Sonar and Radar to your downloads folder. You want them to put movies that get downloaded into appropriate media library folders as covered in the 2 Sonar and 2 Radar video guide, that you want to separate those out. So similarly here, the root directory would be where the torrents, the files, get downloaded. And so if there's no hard links to anything outside of that folder, it will mark it no hard link. Meaning if you know that Sonar and Radar aren't using it, then you can go ahead and remove it and get some space back because there's no hard links. Remember from my Symlink and Hardlink video, if you didn't watch it and you're getting lost at this point, you fucked up. You should probably check all my other videos. If you're genuinely kind of thinking he's going a little too fast here, the fault is yours because you didn't watch my other videos. And I'm giving you a real stern lesson here. Go see my other videos. Don't try and skip. Don't be a lazy bum. Okay, now back to this. So again, this is really important because you can then remove the hard links, get the space back. I'm not going to go into depth about it because I assume you guys should know this stuff if you're watching this. Now, here we put these categories: movies, movies 4K, TV, TV 4K, just like we defined up here. We want to constantly reference the category by the exact name that we put in QBitTorrent. We want to keep it all consistent, right? So if we don't just do something else here, it'll freak out because it won't detect that directory for the category, if you will. So it won't detect the safe path. Now, interestingly enough, one of the things that they also fixed was something that would happen with cross-seed, in terms of some people maybe not having it with Radar or Sonar. So it didn't have hard links outside the directories, but at the same time, they didn't want QBitManage to mark it no hard link. And, if there is, in fact, a hard link present within, let's say, some other directory or something like this. Remember, the root there is the torrents directory, and inside of that, if you saw the cross-seed video, we have our cross-seed folder in that data/torrents folder. So there are hard links there, right? For, let's say, for cross seed. If you're cross seeding, it creates hard links, correct? So that's one of those things where just because it's not movies, it's not in like Sonar and Radar, doesn't mean we aren't using it just to seed torrents. So in a way, this no hard link section, I'm not too sure why this was put in place. I read like a thread about it, but realistically, I know it had something to do with that. The way I kind of work around it is I just do a separate category for movie seating only, TV show seating only, and that's pretty much it. I don't even include those categories anywhere here in QBitManage. So QBitManage doesn't touch them. It doesn't do anything. Next up is share limits. So we got share limits with certain tags like no hard link, how should those be shared? Again, share limits, you can max share 5 categories, filter by including one or more categories. Since one category is radar complete, sonar complete. I don't really use share limits whatsoever. I am somebody who I just like to seed permanently. And if you're not there and you want to do share limits, that's completely fine. But I would urge you to just read the wiki. There's a lot of information about, what sort of options you can do, maximum seeding time, ratios, what tags you can include, what tags, what sort of category, tags, what sort of tags to exclude, etc. Things like this. Recycling bin. I enabled it. I let it empty after 60 days. Save torrents, I set to true. Why not? So if we go under the recycling bin of every folder, you see torrents, movies, .recycling bin. Here we can see the torrents that are part of that recycling bin. Here are the movies that got removed. Okay, so if I'm like, uh-oh, what happened here? Like, why did this get removed and that get removed? I can maybe drag things back and fix them. So here we can see that, yes, in fact, QBitManage is putting them into their own root directory category folders. So .recycling bin. So the TV stuff is being added to .recycling bin. I was just trying to see, because I was like, well, wait a minute, because it says on the wiki it goes to the root dir, but the root dir didn't have .recycling bin. And I was like, where's the recycling bin coming from? This is kind of what recycling bin does. So if you kind of see here, it loads up, it starts the run, it connects to QBT's connection successful right here. Then it gets a torrent list, and then instantly it can essentially tag torrents with tracker errors and remove unregistered torrents. So not only does it remove the torrents, but it also removes the corresponding file. You see what I mean? So in this instance, we had a torrent name called Red, White, and Blue. And the status was unregistered torrent, and it was a trump for superior quality, and it got removed. So what essentially happened is QBitManage realized that there's a tracker error, it's unregistered, and it deleted the torrent and the content files. So here you could see saving torrent JSON to data torrent movies.recycle bin, and then it backed up the torrent and fast resume file to .recycle bin /torrents. And then the content file, of course, as we can see, it's right there under the recycle bin. Here it is. So QBitManage's recycling bin function is really important, and I always recommend that you enable that because you never know where it might mess up. Next up is, of course, we have information regarding the orphan stuff, how long to wait till orphan files get emptied. And then we have our AppRise and Notifier and webhooks integration. I use Notifier. Very straightforward to set it up so that it sends messages to like a Discord server when it runs of things that it removes, etc. It'll also let you know when it's tagging something that has no hard link on it. So when it says tagging hard links, the tag is no hard link. And that's it, guys. That's pretty much all there is to QBitManage. There's obviously all these other things. Check the wiki if you want more specific configuration integration options. This was just trying to get you into an overview for the config, kind of explain how to set up the container with the appropriate container path for root-dir, torrent-dir for the, the saved torrents variable in the configuration file, how to start getting the configuration file going, what the top of the configuration file means. Again, remember the top of the configuration file are the commands, right? This is the QBT parameter. Then there's settings, and then there obviously the wiki tells you of the settings right here of all the types of settings that you can do. And you really want to read through it and try to understand which ones apply to you and which ones don't. Again, we covered directories, most notable being root-dir and torrents-dir. The other ones get created, recycle bin, etc. We talked about the mandatory category part of the config file. And then lastly, we covered very briefly no hard links, kind of what no hard links does. It tags it for any files that don't have hard links to, from radar or sonar, so that you can remove them, get your space back. And then of course there's the recycling bin and the orphan data files that we covered. We skipped over briefly the share limits, but again, it's not something I can help you with. It's best you read the wiki. Anyways, guys, I hope this helped. Take care. See you next time.